Hello and welcome to Prohibition Partners Live. I am Matt Freemantle. I'm the head of event programming at Prohibition Partners Live. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we're very, very excited to welcome someone who is legendary within the psychedelic industry to our Psych stage, who's going to take us through a session titled Lesson Learned from 50 Years of Psychedelic Activism. It's going to be looking to the past, at the present, and into the future of the psychedelic sector. So I'm very, very happy to have joining us on the Psych stage, Amanda Feilding, founder of the Beckley Foundation. Hi, Amanda. How are you doing?
Very well. Hello. Very nice to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you join us today for Prohibition Partners Live. And I'm sure myself, along with everyone else that's joining us, is very excited about seeing your presentation that you've put together for us and then hearing some of your answers to some questions later.
We have undoubtedly reached a very exciting tipping point in the study of psychedelics and the exploration of their unique potential as tools of healing and enhancement. After decades in which research was stifled by repressive drug laws and stigma, we are finally witnessing a reopening of the doors and an overwhelming wave of interest in the possibilities of what psychedelics can offer both the individual and society. Psychedelics are a key to unlock a deeper level of the psyche. They can transform the individual in ways that modern science is only just beginning to understand. Their latent potential lies in their ability to profoundly alter consciousness and evoke the rich subjective experience associated with a state of greater flexibility and plasticity. It is the special quality of this alteration that underlies their wide-ranging benefits, including acting as tools with which to better understand consciousness itself. Most significantly, as demonstrated by an increasing number of scientific studies, psychedelics will in time create a paradigm shift in psychiatry, not only in how we treat, but also in how we understand psychological disorders and help cope with terrible existential problems, like being told one is terminally ill. Importantly, it is not merely a small subset of illnesses that psychedelics have the potential to treat effectively, but rather they can be conceived as non-specific medications for a wide range of disorders, which suggests there is a great area of overlap in the roots underlying many of such disorders. It is not only the healing potential of these compounds that captivates me. I've always been fascinated by the way psychedelics can boost the energy, awareness, and vitality and teach us about our own psyches in order to live more fulfilling and creative lives. From a very early age, my passion was mysticism and the study of altered states of consciousness. And my first priority when embarking on psychedelic research was to reveal the mechanisms by which psychedelics affect the brain and alter consciousness. It is now 50 years since I first realized what amazing tools psychedelics can be. In 1965, I was introduced to LSD, and most importantly, in 1966, I met and became deeply involved with a Dutch scientist, Bart Huges, from whom I learned many fascinating things, including two important hypotheses, one about the mechanisms underlying altered state of consciousness, and the other about the description of the ego as a conditioned reflex mechanism that controls the distribution of the blood in the brain, and therefore neural activity and behavior. I found these explanations life-changing as they enabled me to live and work on LSD and, in my opinion, to see much further and deeper than I would have been able to without them. In those days, we took high doses, but by using them regularly and with a methodical use of vitamin C and glucose, we were able to better navigate this elevated state of consciousness, maintaining control of concentration when needed. So the experience was more like a strong microdose, or, as I used to call it, a psychovitamin, which enhances work, creativity, self-discovery, and enjoyment, and provides a new and more profound insight into psychology, physiology, and the science of consciousness. It also illuminated the joke of the human situation and the role of the ego, which behaves like a tyrannical government in the human brain, often obscuring the true view of reality. This period of my life fundamentally influenced my future endeavours. That is, when I decided that I had found my mission in life, to scientifically research these changing states of consciousness and their potential value for humanity, and to integrate this knowledge into modern society. From the early 1970s, I realized that the only way to break through the barricades of repression built up by prohibition was with the very best science. And over the years, I approached many scientists and doctors with little success. At the beginning of the 1990s, brain imaging technology began to emerge. I decided that I better become a foundation in order to get access to this new technology and with it explore the brain using the psychedelics as tools to alter the state of consciousness so that one could compare the normal state with the enhanced one. To do this, in 1998, I founded the Beckley Foundation, which had been doing pioneering, cutting-edge research into psychedelics ever since. It has been a long, slow process, rather like Sisyphus pushing his rock up the mountain. But now, finally, I think we have reached a plateau, a fertile ground from where it is possible to lay the foundations of the reintegration of psychedelics into society. If I'm talking about reintegration, it is because our ancestors already knew how to make use of this knowledge. Look at the cave paintings of Chauvet, roughly 40,000 years old, or Tassili, 12,000 years old, and all the other high points of cultural history, from Çatalhöyük 8,000 years ago, to Egypt and India, from Crete and Eleusis to the Amazon and Mesoamerica. However, in modern times, suffering patients have been denied access to these medications of the mind, and the scientific community has been blocked from researching their potential for fear of reprisal, such as loss of reputation or grants. Despite these blockages, over the past few decades, I have undertaken many collaborations with leading scientists and institutions around the world, and hopefully helped reform global drug policies. A major breakthrough happened in 2005, when I persuaded Professor David Nutt to join me in the research of psychedelics in the UK. Later, Robin Carhart-Horrocks also joined us, and when in 2008 David moved to Imperial College London, we launched the Beckley Imperial Research Programme, co-directed by David and myself, with our first brain imaging study investigating psilocybin, published in 2012. This paved the way for other exciting research projects, producing, for example, this image, which reflects the difference in connectivity of the brain between placebo with that of a brain on psychedelics. Since then, we have carried out brain imaging studies with 5-MeO, DMT, and most importantly, at least for me, on LSD, in order to investigate the similarities and the differences between the different compounds. It has been a wonderfully productive partnership. 2016 marked an essential milestone when we published 2 game-changing studies, both of which were part of the Beckley Imperial Programme. The first was the first ever brain imaging study with LSD and human subjects. This study was a major breakthrough, demonstrating important characteristics of the mechanisms underlying the effects of LSD. One of our key results demonstrated the dramatic increase in global connectivity across the whole brain. Under LSD, brain regions that do not usually communicate with each other became highly interconnected, resulting in a much more integrated brain. The reduction of blood in the areas of the default mode network resulted in a decrease of repression and a much freer flow of increased connectivity. These changes are associated with participants reporting that their normal sense of self had been altered or lost. We also observed a dramatic increase in connectivity of the visual cortex with over 20 extra centers of the rest of the brain, producing the rich visual experiences that can occur under the influence of LSD. The second landmark Beckley Imperial study, whose results were launched the same year, was a pilot study evaluating the use of psilocybin in overcoming treatment-resistant depression. This study had the remarkable success rate of 67 of the subjects attaining remission after 1 week of treatment with psilocybin, and the remaining 43% remaining depression-free after 3 months. These and other studies have shown the great promise of psychedelics in both healing illness, increasing well-being, and evoking transformational experiences for the individual, which can change behavior at its roots. Our work has started to reveal the nature of the peak experience, a richer state of consciousness characterized by a more complex, less predictable, and more chaotic neural activity. These shifts in activity can facilitate personality changes by allowing the overcoming of rigid, counterproductive patterns of thought and behavior, which underlie physiological illnesses such as depression and addiction. From our studies, we found that a full-dose psychedelic would frequently promote the occurrence of mystical-type experience, correlated with ego dissolution, and this was a strong predicator of positive long-term therapeutic outcomes. Psychedelic experience increases neuroplasticity and the power to learn and adapt, and can make the brain out and can shake the brain out of its negative patterns. It is like heating up metal. It becomes more flexible, allowing new thoughts and behavioral patterns to take root, or like pressing the restart button on a computer. In one session, one can achieve what would normally take years of talking therapy. Remarkably, many of the changes observed under psychedelics appeared to mimic the way infants' brains work. This more fluid, plastic state allows for changes to take place, repressed memories to be accessed, and maladaptive conditioning, such as addictive behavior, to be unlearned and overcome. The psychological mechanisms behind the therapeutic and transformational potential of psychedelics are beginning to be uncovered by the research. Finally, the world waking up to the great potential of these psychedelic compounds to improve our approach to healing sickness, to become easier, has made it become easier for me to expand the work of the Beckley Foundation by setting up collaborations with a much wider network of scientists and institutions around the world. In the last few years, I've focused most of my attention on reopening the doors to my old favourite, LSD, starting with the development of an extended research program on LSD microdosing, exploring its use both as a treatment and a tool to enhance well-being and creativity. Studies conducted as part of our Beckley LSD research program have already produced exciting findings demonstrating some of the therapeutic potential of LSD, particularly for cognitive enhancement, mood, and pain management. With my collaborators in Brazil, we're exploring in great detail the effects of LSD at the molecular and cellular levels in order to better understand its mechanisms of action. Following promising results demonstrating the ability of LSD to increase neuroplasticity and improve learning, we are now in the process of exploring further mechanisms of action of LSD on protein expression using lab-grown mini-brains, as well as testing its effect on neurodegenerative illnesses and aging. I'm currently planning a range of clinical trials in order to further explore the therapeutic potential of LSD as a mood and cognitive enhancer and its use for the management of various types of pain. Apart from LSD research, I'm also investigating the therapeutic benefits of other under-researched compounds, such as 5-MeO-DMT, a powerful psychedelic that can induce profound mystical experiences, with effects lasting for only a short time, and which could make the substance much more interesting as an alternative treatment in psychedelic-assisted therapy. And this is the therapy from which it comes, which is milked to produce its substance. But to me, psychedelics are not merely valuable therapeutic tools. In addition to providing a new hope for the treatment of a number of mental and physical conditions, they also constitute a unique tool to enhance well-being, flexibility, adaptability, and resilience. I personally have experienced what a great aid psychedelics, even at small doses, can be to attaining a higher level of awareness while meditating. In my opinion, LSD can be used as a tool to prepare the brain for higher activity, which, rather like a farmer preparing the ground for seeding, helps achieve a more fertile ground for either meditation or creative thinking. It would be fascinating to explore how the careful use of psychedelics could speed up and enhance the long and hard-earned gains emanating from meditative practices. I also believe that in addition to being used as a therapeutic tool, psychedelics can play an important role in building up resilience to the negative impact of stressful and adverse situations. We are living in a rapidly changing environment, and in the past our ancestors have had to adapt or die out. We ourselves are now going through similar stressful times of change. Possibly, as suggested by our recent research, the careful use of psychedelics can help increase neuroplasticity and the ability to learn and adapt. Maybe the intelligent use of microdosing could help us navigate this period of acute stress, which is currently causing an epidemic of mental health problems. This is an area of research I'm currently investigating. There are truly These are truly exciting times for psychedelic research, not only because of the general growing interest from the public and the scientific and medical communities, but also due to the emergence of technologies such as telemedicine, virtual reality, apps, wearable testing equipment, and so on. These offer great possibility for optimizing psychedelic therapy and conducting research on a greater scale. With the rapid change in the psychedelic scene, which has been fueled by our and others' groundbreaking research, an old mission of mine has come to the fore again: the essential provision of access to these new treatments through the development of clinics and retreats for psychedelic-assisted therapy. With decades of experience in conducting preclinical and clinical research on psychedelics, the Beckley Foundation is well suited to develop high-standard clinics, ensuring the highest quality of care and optimal therapeutic approaches, with the approval stamp of some of the leading experts in the field. With collaborators in Spain, we have been developing a prototype psychedelic clinic with research and education centres attached, whose main objectives are to provide safe access to psychedelic-assisted therapy with compounds legally available in Spain. 2. To advance knowledge and undertake trials investigating how these compounds work and how to optimize their use. Certain plant medicines are not illegal in Spain. 3. To provide education about psychedelics' potential for treating mental illness and enhancing well-being, plus training therapies in psychedelic-assisted therapy. I'm also in the process of developing other clinics worldwide, identifying the best possible collaborators and experts to work with, and implementing the most ethical, safe, and professional frameworks to ensure the greatest accessibility and quality of care. I would like to conclude with a few thoughts about the future of the evolving psychedelic space. Psychedelics are attracting a tremendous and ever-growing interest at the moment, which comes with very many exciting new possibilities, but also with certain concerns and challenges to be aware of. Psychedelics are precious and mysterious compounds that have been referred to in traditional societies as the food of the gods. From the beginning of human culture, they have been closely integrated with the spiritual experience, so essential to the development of humanity. As such, they need to be approached with great care and respect, and a thorough understanding and knowledge of how they work and how they can be used to enhance our human experience. As the 16th century French author Rabelais said, "Science without conscience is the ruin of the soul." We need to act with caution as the wind of the gold rush blows over from cannabis to the psychedelics. Strangely, although I'm finding there's an explosion of interest in the work I have been doing with the Beckley Foundation, I'm also finding it very difficult to raise the necessary funding to carry out the research needed in order to optimize and guide our use of these compounds. Philanthropic funding is getting more difficult to raise, as quite understandably, some philanthropists are put off by the idea that their donations might end up benefiting a greedy market. So my predicament now is how to find the necessary funding from donations and investments to move forward in exploratory and clinical trials, and also in providing access to these compounds and therapies to the widest range of people in need. I would like the Beckley Foundation to remain a standard bearer of high research standards, integrity, and sound ethical values. My mission for the last 50 years has mostly been revolving around two poles: research, with the exploration of underlying mechanisms and the potential benefits of these compounds, and identifying the best way they can help the individual and our species more generally. And secondly, drug policy, addressing the question of how to reform our global drug policies that control us all, from being prison walls to being the friendly and informed guardians that can help us in our endeavour to improve society and the health of its subjects by creating scientifically based, adaptable policies. By having to some degree completed the first phase of that journey, new doors are opening, such as how do we provide access to these compounds for those in need, both those who are ill and those also who are healthy, which is why setting up clinics, retreats, educational centres, and communities becomes a vital part of the future movement. Aside from these new endeavours, research will remain my main passion, and I'm determined to conduct more pioneering work to further explore the intelligent use of psychedelics hold, the potential to alleviate psychological distress, enhance human creativity and innovation, and ultimately help our species evolve and survive. Thank you very much.
Amanda, thank you very much. That was fascinating.
Well,
I loved listening.
thank you. Thank you.
So, Amanda, thank you much for that. That was fantastic and really, really insightful to see the work you've done in the past into psilocybin studies and the neuroplasticity element and the studies in Brazil and the amazing people you've had through and working with you at the Beckley Foundation as well. It's been amazing to see, and thank you for giving me and everyone else at the conference a further insight into your work, and thank you for being a pioneer for the last 50 years. It's been amazing. I've got a quick few questions for you as well. Just want to try and dig in a little bit more into your work and perhaps what you might be looking at doing in the future. What inspired you initially to create the Beckley Foundation and establish the Beckley Foundation back in 1998?
Well, it was really as an essential move forward, because having researched psychedelics, and particularly LSD myself, for over 30 years and finding out its very deep potential and understanding much more about its underlying mechanisms. And then, but at that point, no one was interested. It was much too taboo. You couldn't even talk about LSD. And then brain imaging started to develop in the 1990s. And I thought I really must get access to that, because with that you can correlate the subjective experience with actual images of what's happening in the brain. And obviously, actually I was trained as an artist, so it's a very attractive idea to me to do brain imaging studies. So that became quite a passion of mine. And also, I realized that as a single female who had left school at 16, and had no money, how do you set about changing global drug policies and undertaking and opening up the closed doors into psychedelic research? So I realized, well, I can't do it as myself. I must become a foundation. And actually, it was a very good move. And I had probably about, 15 of the top scientists of the day in the field. They kindly joined my advisory group, which gave me substance. And then to change global drug policy, I started, because then it wasn't based on scientific evidence, and I could see totally you had to base it on scientific evidence or there was no hope. And so I started giving very influential seminars at the House of Lords. And obviously the people on my advisory board, many of them spoke. And what I wanted to bring to attention was the fact that cannabis and the psychedelics are in a completely different category and must be separated off from other illegal compounds because it was obstructing their use medically and causing infinite damage and harm. So with the foundation, I immediately started to research, looking at what's the underlying changes in cerebral circulation on psilocybin with a PET scan with a collaborator, Franz Wollenweider in Zurich. And then what I do is search for people with brain imaging where I could set up and do research in different places in Berkeley. I got the first approvals, ethical approvals to do research with LSD brain imaging, but sadly it never actually got fulfilled. But it was really a 50-year battle with the taboo. And now we've suddenly got to this high plateau where, amazingly, the elephant is realizing the pill is good for it, or beginning to do so. And so we've got a new era beginning where I think we can do, funding permitting, vastly more important research, which needs to be done both at the exploratory level and then obviously to take it through to phase 1, 2, and 3, so these compounds become legally licensed and regulated so that they're available for doctors to prescribe. And in the long, I think they should also be, carefully controlled by drug policies, but they should be available in much more ways than just being for treating the sick, because they're amazing compounds, and our ancestors realized that so well. It was the center of their culture, which made us, so we should be grateful for it and not suppress it.
It must be extremely satisfying to see the progress that's been made during your time working in the field. What do you
Yes.
think is so unique about psychedelics and their potential as treatments specifically for psychological disorders? I've heard you say before that you believe LSD might be the most beneficial psychedelics compound. Can you explain why?
Yes. Basically, because it's the least toxic. It is non-toxic. You can't kill an animal with an overdose of LSD, which is pretty unique. And the minutest quantity has its effect. It marries in with the serotonin receptor, which closes over it. And it is so subtle because it can be controlled so carefully with the different doses, from being a very, very gentle little lift and enhancement of your natural vitality and enthusiasm in life. You get more like a child, you get more enthusiasm, you get more fun and enjoyment, and it lifts the mood. With so many people being depressed nowadays, it's a non-toxic way to maybe help. Of course, we have to do the research, but and I think it got unfairly. It became the Cinderella of the drug box, and it needs to be reintegrated into polite society. And I promised Albert Hoffman, who discovered it, that I would do that for him, for sure. He was 102. He hung around waiting for me to do it, which I sadly didn't accomplish in his lifetime. But slowly, I launched our research on LSD at the Royal Society, because I did it as a homage to Albert, who I thought had been under-recognised in his long life, I might add. But how do they, to your question of how do they bring about these changes, which are unique from any other treatments. Because if we take treatment-resistant depression or depression, really there is no new treatment. There's talking therapy, and there's SSRIs and antidepressants. But they're all kind of like a plaster you put on a wound. They don't do anything to help overcome, cure, treat the wound, really. They suppress the wound. And they have a lot of symptoms. And you have to take them every day. And it takes weeks before they have their effect. And when people get off them, they can be suicidal. They have a lot of unpleasant side effects. And in the last 30 years, no new treatment has been produced by the pharmaceutical industry. Whereas treating a person with psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy is quite a different matter. You prepare them for being in the right state of mind, which is very important with psychedelic. So they get to know their therapist, they get to know what it's going to be like, they're prepared. And then with one session, turning off this mechanism, the default mode network, which is like the old-fashioned, as Freud says, the ego, more that sort of thing, the controlling mechanism. And that allows all the centers of the brain to start communicating. And so the whole brain becomes much more flexible, chaotic, but also neuroplastic, meaning that it breaks down the rigid thinking which had built up over the years and formed the underlying mechanism of the illness, the depression. It breaks it down, and out of that can grow a new, more healthy understanding of the situation. It's like resetting, reheating the metal and being able to put it in a setting which is more to the advantage of the person, i.e. a happier state of setting. And it's wonderful. And that's with one dose. And people report after their psychedelic experience an afterglow of kind of confidence and vitality and openness. And, their family notice it. And as opposed to SSRI, which closes you down and suppresses your feelings, this is opening you up and somehow allowing you to reboot and shape yourself and put yourself in a stronger position. I once overcame a long habit of, in 1966 actually, a long habit of nicotine smoking. I loved to smoke because I was so tall and I wanted to stop growing, so I smoked. And I decided to give it up on an LSD experience and never smoked again. And so that introduced me to the idea that you could just overcome it. It made you more forceful in your decisions. And then we started the research at John Hopkins, which I was a little bit involved in, at least in the idea of it, based on that. And it's an amazing study which has shown an 80% success rate in overcoming treatment-resistant addiction to nicotine. So what we're getting with psychedelics are exceptional efficacy. And so they're really a paradigm shift, because nothing has come along to help with this terrible mental health crisis we've got. And I think that we'll find that the psychedelics help us in many ways shift and help treat these conditions of the mind. And that's only part of what psychedelics can do, because they can also be used as enhancement tools. And I think they're going to be amazing in palliative care, in helping treat the elderly, because we've done research on LSD, which has shown amazingly positive results with microdosing on mood, on cognitive functioning, and on pain management. And those are three very basic requirements. So hopefully, instead of, instead of having to put people on tranquilizers and they sit there in front of the telly for the rest of their lives, they can be much more active and vital and happy. And I think there's all sorts of areas where these compounds are going to help.
So it sounds like there's a lot more to come in the field of psychedelic research moving forward. What are your plans, and what are the plans for the Beckley Foundation moving forward?
Well, they're very extensive because there's an enormous amount to do. I mean, I feel we've just got to the foot of the mountain, and there's a vast amount of really fascinating research projects to do on the compounds we've already started researching, psilocybin, LSD, but there are also other compounds. I'm very fascinated in 5-MeO, the toad venom, because a person can get a full mystical experience, which is the kind of catalyst for change, in 90 minutes. So it would facilitate a much cheaper form of access, because if a person has to be in the clinic all day, obviously that's doctor's time, all sorts of costs. Whereas what we want to do is make available this medicine to, all the people who might benefit from it. And therefore one needs a lot of trained doctors, trained therapists, and clinic outlets so people can access it. And so we aren't at that stage yet, but we're just getting there. So we need to kind of prepare for it. But for myself, I love doing exploratory research. And there's plenty of that to do. I've got a lot of wonderful protocols I want to carry out. So I'm full of ideas of research I want to do. So that's really my greatest pleasure. But I think also it's how do we get it out to the people in need? And at the moment, I think 1 in 3 teenage girls in England is depressed. I mean, it's becoming quite epidemic mental health. And I think probably our society with social media and everything isn't helping. And there is no new treatment cure coming out of pharmaceutical industry. And this is wonderful because actually it's potentially very inexpensive. Instead of having years of talking therapy, you can have much more condensed and powerful sessions, obviously with preparation and integration. But so hopefully, and I do think that the change in attitudes which come about through these experiences, people respond and have filled in questionnaires, that they become more, they have higher scores of mindfulness, of openness, of loving nature, of, getting on with their family and everything. There are many positives which come with it. And another wonderful research actually done by John Hopkins and NYU, but a study I very much wanted to complete, was for dying people who've been given a death sentence, basically, and obviously suffer great unhappiness and depression and anxiety. And it was found that, again, having a psychedelic with all the treatment therapy produced an 80% success rate of undoing them. So there's all sorts of ways that these compounds can be used to lower suffering in many, they're non-specific. That's what's so wonderful. It's changing the way our consciousness is functioning for a certain amount of time, in which time great changes can come about if in the right setting. And that's one area. But the other area where they're so incredibly powerful is they can be used in very small quantities, which is now called microdosing. So which comes from being barely perceptible, but they do the same things as the larger dose, but at a much more delicate level. So it's very easily controlled by the person who undertakes it. And we've shown that it can help with mood, with cognitive functioning. I'm doing some work hoping to show that people who are suffering cognitive decline, one can help them relearn better with the help of a psychedelic. There's a myriad of different ways which one can harness these incredible compounds to help humanity in this rather difficult phase we're in now of maximum change in a way. And, if you study the history of mankind, you'll see a lot of our ancestors became extinct because they couldn't adapt. And I think part of the help that these psychedelics can give is increased learning and increased adaptability and more energy, vigor, vitality, compassion for one's neighbor and indeed the environment. There are all sorts of positives. And the poor compounds have been bathed in bad publicity for the last 50 years. So they have to swim out of that with the evidence coming from really good research. And I'm hoping that's what we at the Beckley can continue to provide. And there are more people getting into the field all the time, which is wonderful. And I think it's a win-win situation because I think it's a new technique of healing and enhancing. And what more can one ask of a compound? So let's change our policies. I mean, I find drug policy, I've done it now for 50 years, very boring. But it's essential we change it. It's a disaster, our drug policies have been a prohibition. They don't work and they cause untold suffering at every level. People have their lives ruined in jail for nothing. Meant, whatever it is, a third of the income of the world, or almost that, goes into the hands of criminals. Children who want to try these things can't get safe compounds. It's a disaster. And what we need is for governments to re-own this territory and have policies based totally on scientific evidence. And first we should decriminalize all compounds, and then we should reschedule psychedelics so that they can easily be researched and doctors can prescribe them where they think is suitable. At the moment, they're in their highest category of danger. Well, they're non-addictive and they're not highly dangerous. The scientific proof is that they're not. So if they were rescheduled, research would become much cheaper. Governments should be backing it. I mean, at the moment, I have to kind of look down the streets to find money for the research, which is ridiculous. And I get it very cheaply because the scientists hopefully like working with me and we do great stuff together. But still, one has to find the funding. And but now money is beginning to come into this world in a kind of afterglow of the cannabis wave, which can be a benefit, but also certain dangers it produces. But anyway, what we want is more research, more clinics, more availability, and credible, sensible drug policy which protects our young people and enables research to happen and medicines to be provided where best. So I think we're really beginning to be on that route. I mean, I thought we'd get there at the end of the 60s, but then down came the closed door, the prohibition, and we've lost 50 years or whatever it is. But now let's work together and make it happen. So
Feels very much like we're at the tip of the iceberg, and there's lots more to come.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. We're just starting to discover this wonderful new medicine, and well, I think we'll benefit from it.
Me too. Me too. And I'm sure there's lots of people that agree. There's a lot of people that
Okay.
agree. Hopefully at this conference as well. Hopefully at Prohibition Partners Live.
Right, right. Very good. Well, very nice talking with you. Goodbye.
It's been fantastic speaking with you, Amanda Feilding. Thank you so much again for joining us, and thank you for your brilliant work with the Beckley Foundation, as always, and long may it continue. It's been great to get your insight and hear everything that you've had to say on the sector and the industry. So thank you very much.